Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to CoachX Conversations on LinkedIn, CoachX Live with the Institute of Coaching. My name is Jeff Hull. I'm the Director of Global Development here at the Institute, and we are thrilled to have you. It is good morning, good afternoon, or good evening from wherever you are. So please say hello in the comments section and let us know. We are excited to have you here. We want to get to your questions, because we have someone with us today who is incredibly exciting for me to interview and incredibly expert on a topic that is near and dear to all of us these days, digital body language. I have with me here one of the world's renowned experts on communication and collaboration and leadership. She is a Global Guru's top 30 speaker and keynote presenter. She's been named in the top 30 keynote presenters and communication coaches in the world. And she has a brand new book out that is super timely as we're all dealing with the virtual world and what will probably become something like the hybrid workspace. And many of us that join these LinkedIn Lives for the Institute of Coaching are coaches that are working with people virtually and working with leaders that are struggling and dealing with the adapting to the virtual space. So I just want to welcome Erica Dhawan, and she's here to tell us about this amazing new book she has just coming out called, as you would guess, Digital Body Language. So welcome, Erica.
Thank you so much for having me here, Jeff.
I don't even know where to begin. When I read your book, I was so excited because it just nails the topic in terms of the kind of research that's behind what we need to be thinking about in moving to virtual space, which we've kind of been forced to, right, over the last year. But I think many of us are realizing that it's not going away. And it's going to be part of our normal workplace, no matter whether we're back in the office or hybrid or whatever variation. And so I have so many questions, and I'm feeling privileged because I get to control what questions we start with. But we will try to get to as many questions as we can from folks that are coming in from all over the world. So just taking a quick look, Erica, we have folks from Florida, South Africa, Mexico, oh my God, Cleveland, Ohio, Vancouver. So we'll try to get to your questions, put them in the chat, but I get to start. And what I was really interested in is when I saw that the title of your book, Digital Body Language, is specific. It's very particular. It could have been like digital conversations or digital communication, but it's not. It's digital body language. And so I'd love to dig into all three, digital, body, and language with you. But I think it's really interesting to start out with the body part, because I know for myself, when I was writing about leadership in my recent book, I had a whole section on somatic leadership. Mm-hmm. And I didn't think it was a big deal to talk about the body, the emotions, the energy. But a lot of people came back to me and they were like, what is that? What does the body part have to do with leadership? And so the fact that you included it, not only in your book and in your research, but in your title, to me says a lot about how important the body is, the physical. So can you talk a little bit about how you came to that and what it really means to you?
Jeff, I grew up as a very shy, introverted kid. I struggled to find my voice. I didn't really have a connection to understanding the importance of my body as a kid. Everything was about being studious. And I think a lot of the times I was in my Indian culture, my parents were Indian immigrants, a lot of the culture was very focused on, mind intelligence, but not as much of body intelligence. I do remember, when I was in school, because my parents spoke Hindi at home, I had accented English when I got to school, and I really struggled to find my voice, and I got teased. But one of the things that I started to do because I was so shy was I started to really understand American culture by observing other people's body language. What allowed the popular girls to be popular? Their heads were high, their shoulders were back, and how they walked in school. What allowed the cool kids to be cool during school assemblies? They were slouching and engaging with their body in a certain way. And I really learned that it's not just what we say, it's how we say it. I then remember as a kid watching Bollywood Indian movies and not necessarily knowing exactly what the actors and actresses were saying, but I could read their body language and know the entire storyline. And so in many ways, my fascination for body language, I think, came from the fact that I was shy and introverted. And then at the same time, one of the things that I developed a passion for as a kid was Bollywood dance, maybe from all of those Bollywood movies.
Oh,
Something that I loved. And it was something that was a source of expression, given, sports and a lot of movement activities were not a big part of my upbringing as an immigrant. And in many ways, fast forward 30 years, I became an expert at communication, and body language and movement is such an important part of my life. I continue to dance. Sometimes I engage my clients to dance. So we'll all have to, read more about your intelligence around somatic leadership, because I'm such a fan of the importance of somatics. But about 5 years ago, I kept hearing clients ask me the same questions. They would say, why is there so much misunderstanding at work? How do we better connect with different ages and working styles? And I realized, similar to me being an immigrant to traditional body language as a kid, today, we are all immigrants to the body of our language in a digital world. And that's what really sparked me to write this book, that we all know that there's what's being said, but then there's what's really being said. And so much of that came from body language cues. And I set out to create the new rule book for how we can still read those in a digital world.
I love that, because I think that what you're pointing to to my mind is a silver lining of the disruption that we've experienced and the acceleration of what was already happening, becoming more virtual, using video conferencing and everything. And that is that we, in the real world, we're probably not as aware of the energies that we give off non-verbally, of the way we are communicating with our bodies, right? So now that it's become kind of like required that we pay attention to these things, it's really valuable to have experts like yourself who've done research, who can give us the tips, who can help us make sure that we're saying what we want to say rather than what our bodies are saying. And, that there's an alignment, I guess, between the words you use and the body language. So can you talk a little bit about that? Like, what do you recommend people be thinking about when they want to be effective in the virtual space with their body language?
So I'll start with maybe a pre-pandemic example, and then how that's impacted, a during pandemic example. I'll never forget, I was meeting with a high-powered executive at one of the largest financial services firms. I had prepared entirely for the meeting. It was a face-to-face meeting. I had been connected to her through another senior executive. I was ready to make my pitch around some of the insights from my last book, Get Big Things Done. And I come in, I shake her hand, I'm looking and engaged with her. And all of a sudden she looks at me and she says, "You picked the worst time." And I was like, "Oh, it was what your assistant gave me. Would you like to reschedule?" And she's like, no, my assistant or my teammate will come and take the meeting. And the teammate came and took the meeting with me to learn who I was and what I had to offer. But this client, this executive, sat in the same room with her, listening, but also looking at her phone the entire time, looking down and preparing for some press interview she was going to do. It was the weirdest conversation and most uncomfortable conversation ever, with the lack of direct eye contact, the cues of disinterest where she's looking down the entire time. And then her teammate doesn't really know what to do and is sort of asking me questions because she's being spied on by her boss, but doesn't really know how to engage. It's such an example of how even our digital is impacting our physical body language. And it really struck me, I'll still remember how rude I felt. Like, we should have just rescheduled the meeting. Right. But, fast forward to a digital world where we are on endless conference calls, where we feel like people are multitasking, where we have virtually no eye contact, whether we're, on phone calls or in emails or even in video. While I'm looking into the camera, you may be looking at me. And the fact that it's also awkward that we see our own faces on the screen can be very distracting. So let me talk a little bit about what do we do about it? How do we navigate these challenges? I have a couple of key practices in my book that I think are really important. The first one is good body language is not about just looking great on a camera. It is about how you make others feel in a digital world. So the first step is to value them visibly. Remember, what was implicit in traditional body language has to be explicit. Now, show radical recognition, acknowledge them, ask thoughtful questions. Don't ask lame ones like, how's the weather? Ask
Right.
what's important to you. Start off with that. Don't use filler words. In many ways, I think video meetings, we have to think more like TV show hosts that get to the point quickly versus office hosts where we had all those body cues to read.
I always tell my clients to be more specific when they're dealing with video communication. Like, it's not how's your day? It's tell me one thing that happened to you today that was really great or that was really challenging.
Yeah, and then here's an order we'll go, just so you know what usually otherwise, if we say who wants to share, we usually hear from 3 extroverts and the loudest people first, and they might take up all the time, and then we have to rush to the next agenda item. So in many ways, thinking like that TV show host is a good reframe. As you said, be specific, have an agenda before, engage everyone, call on people, use the chat tools. If people are feeling video call fatigue, have a set time, maybe the first 5 minutes of the meeting where everyone should be on video to create an immediate connection. And then maybe if you're screen sharing a presentation, maybe set a rule that you don't need to be on video anymore. Or there's certain points in the meeting where you want everyone in gallery view mode on video and certain points where it doesn't matter. Those are just some ways to showcase that, number one, you are engaged. Number two, you're actively listening. And number three, you really care. In many ways, I say reading messages carefully is the new listening. Writing clearly is the new empathy. And I would say speaking clearly, too, is the new empathy. And also, in many ways, knowing when to switch the channel. I like to say a phone call is worth 1,000 emails.
Yeah.
So knowing the difference is also just as important. Those are just some examples.
Oh, they're all awesome. And they're so right on in terms of what we need to be thinking about, because it's all about, I think, being more intentional in the space that we're in, right? Awareness is key, and you're pointing to it in terms of being specific, and don't always think that you have to be on video. I mean, just have some awareness of what is the right medium to use. That's great. I want to encourage folks. We have people from all over the world joining us, and I'd love to encourage you to throw in some questions in the chat.
Can I also share, if anyone in the chat wants to share a digital body language pet peeve, that might be interesting.
So or any
ones we want to solve.
So throw in the chat any pet peeves or things that you've seen that you've loved. Maybe you would like Erica to comment on, or challenges that you've had. So let's move on to the digital part. And because I'm curious what your research has shown is really, what are the fundamental changes that are happening that we need to be aware of as we move into this sort of digital space on an ongoing 24-hour basis?
A couple of key things I learned based on my research. The first is that when it comes to digital communication, written communication, our messages are visual. People read emails like they read websites. Did you have a clear subject line? Did you get to the point quickly? Did you use bullets and underline headings? If you want people to really read your communications, you can't write a long prose that will cause people to maybe glance over it. People read in maybe 15 seconds now to 30 seconds a message. So remember that your texts, your IMs, your emails, even your video communication is visual now. And that reframe will really help you think about, was I clear on what others need from me? Did I have a clear ask for them? Am I using the right channel? Did I share it in the most effective way? And when we truly think before we type, when we slow down to speed up, it can create immense results. We can stand out as communicators, as leaders, as coaches. And we all know the difference of someone who is an excellent communicator versus someone where you have 3 confusing messages and you don't want to hire them as your coach, or you decide maybe this isn't the right person for me, even though they might have great body language digitally. If they don't have good digital body language, it can affect them, more than ever in our virtual marketplace.
So true.
Another thing is slowing down. I like to say less haste equals more speed. the pressure to communicate quickly can cause many of us to reward the fastest person who responds to an email, the quickest person who jumps in on a Zoom call, versus actually giving time for people to think. Remember when someone was stroking their chin and we just like gave them 30 seconds to think, or, tilting their head? We knew they were listening attentively.
Yeah.
Now, if we don't hear from them on a video call, we're like, are you on mute? Did you hear me? Do you have tech issues? Are you multitasking? And I think it's just this rushed nature that is a major danger. So prioritizing thoughtfulness over hastiness is important. And last but not least, remember that there are differences, introverts, extroverts. I'm seeing introverts really thriving and loving chat tools in video meetings, avoiding turn taking and giving them space to share. I'm hearing extroverts really needing that airtime, but you have to manage it. Use breakout rooms or a moderator. And so understanding that we are not all the same digitally, that we have different digital preferences. In fact, in my new book, I have an assessment that you can take to understand your digital body language style. There are digital adapters who really feel like immigrants to the world of digital. They didn't grow up with it. They've started to use it in the workplace. And then digital natives who grew up with it, have always used it, from when they were in lower or middle school, that may love text IM, hate voicemails. Whereas adapters will, love phone calls and, meetings to discuss and hate the flurry of digital communication. And so also understanding preferences and differences in your workplace is important.
What about emotions? I think that the thing that I notice is that there's a lot of disparity and difference in terms of understanding that there's emotions involved in almost all the digital communications, like emails have an emotional valence, texts have an emotional, emojis, the video. What do you think are some of the best tips or best practices around managing the emotional context of these digital communications?
One of the things I found in my research is that I'm excited about is body language hasn't disappeared in a digital world, it's just transformed. And digital body language will allow us to bring emotion back to our communications if we use it thoughtfully and carefully. Most of us are doing it blindly or accidentally right now.
Exclamation points.
Right. I mean, we've all seen emojis where we're like, is that friendly or are they being passive aggressive?
Right.
All caps messages. If someone says, here you go, research shows if it's here you go with 3 exclamation points at the end, if a woman sends it, someone is more likely to interpret it as excitement. If a man sends it, someone is more likely to interpret it as urgent. We even have differences in how we judge messages based on emotion, based on gender, generation, other factors as well. And so my general rule of thumb, whether it's periods, exclamations, all caps, question marks, don't worry, I cover it all in the book. I have the digital elements of style of 1 versus 3, text versus email. The general rule of thumb is don't get emotionally hijacked. There's 2 things you have to ask yourself when you're sending messages to be thoughtful of digital body language and to avoid reading into others' digital body language. The first is, who has more or less power here? This often shapes how you interpret messages. If you get a text from a boss saying, get this done now, period, at the end, digital natives tend to see that as anger versus a digital adapter may just see it as good punctuation. Get this done. Can you get this done now? And we can't read those cues, that tone virtually. The second thing is, know how to, if you feel like you're hijacked, know how to switch the channel to the appropriate channel. As I said earlier, a phone call is worth 1,000 emails. Right. Don't respond to the back and forth. Know when to shift it. Right. And last but not least, I think we just have to give others the benefit of the doubt. I mean, many people are rushing, many people are typing too fast, and sometimes we don't give them the benefit of the doubt. And in these times, we have to do that more than ever.
Yeah, the likelihood of them having negative intent or malintent is pretty small.
Yeah,
I think in general we can give people a little slack, so to speak, in terms of. But what you're doing with your book, which is so powerful, is helping us with awareness. Because I think one of the first things I do as a coach is help my clients become aware of the fact that their text, their emails, that their video, it's all emotionally laden. right? So just becoming aware of that and being more thoughtful about it is really, really important. I'm getting so many comments about pet peeves. So before we go out of time, why don't you comment on a few of them that are coming through? So some folks are having issues with backdrops in Zooms, whether that's a good idea or a bad idea. Another person is saying a pet peeve is eating. You know, I actually encourage teams to consider having like a meal together, but this person considers it a pet peeve. What else is coming through? Oh, muting and unmuting, or some people on video and not on video. We're all developing a long list of pet peeves. Do you want to comment on any of those or any?
I do digital body language therapy sessions. Don't worry. That's really what the book is. It's your therapy guide. So let's talk about virtual backgrounds. There's a lot of what do I do here? I'm a big fan of being authentic, being yourself. Just don't have a distracting background. Don't have an unmade bed behind you. If your company or, you know, the group you're working with, you know, wants a formal virtual background, I think there's nothing wrong with that as well. Although I would say actually just having a non-fake background can be better. The point is to have good lighting, to be able to connect and look into the camera so that people can see you versus a lot of other things. When it comes to muting and unmuting, I think that what we have to remember is what was implicit in traditional body language has to be explicit in digital body language. We could read the cues of a room. If someone had furrowed brows, we knew maybe we should call on them next. If, you know, someone was like nodding or raising their hand, we knew how to engage them with a synchronicity in a room.
Now they have to press a button to raise their hand.
Right. And it is hard and distracting. And I think that what everyone should start doing is at the beginning of meetings, set almost like housekeeping norms. You know, one norm could be, we'd like everyone on video for the first 10 minutes as we engage. Please use the chat actively throughout the session to share questions and thoughts, or we'll use the chat at, 20 minutes in as a way to engage everyone. So, because sometimes people get overwhelmed, and then just set some standards around mute. Do you want everyone on mute when someone else is speaking, or do you want no one on mute? And sometimes that's okay too. If people are in private, closed spaces, it actually could be better for candor and candid discussions. So those are just some examples that I think can help.
Those are great. Yeah, I think that this idea of being very thoughtful and setting some guidelines so that everybody's kind of singing from the same sheet of music, it also gives us permission to relax a little bit and realize that we don't have to be perfect, and we can actually all get better at this over time, right? Yeah. I'd love for you to dive into the third topic of your title, which is language. And one of the things that you focus in on is the different ways people use language in different demographics, right? Comfort with millennials, and I know you recently wrote an article about this, different styles, different ways of communicating in terms of using the language, and that like baby boomers react to certain ways of speaking and millennials are more relaxed. And sometimes that can be kind of generic. And I think what I love about what you're doing in your book and what you've written about is you're much more specific about what these different demographics, what people really need to communicate effectively using words, using content. So do you want to speak about that a little bit?
Yeah, part 3 of my new book, Digital Body Language, is all about some of our digital body language differences across genders, generations, cultures. And one of the key things I learned, there's not one language, right? Similar to different regional dialects or cultural accents. Different countries have different languages. We have different digital body languages.
Right.
And we have to remember that there may be signals we are sending even if we don't intend to. In fact, on the gender side, one study that I looked at found that when a younger woman used multiple emojis in the workplace compared to a man at any rank level in that same workplace, the woman would be more likely to be seen as incompetent. The man would be more likely to be seen as casual or friendly. So these are just a bias of an emoji symbol. But I also learned a lot of other things around how this is an opportunity to be thoughtful of what inclusive language looks like. For example, for me, one of the lessons I learned is I always say, hey, guys, even if it's a group of women. And
I tend to do that too, actually. And then I've caught myself and asked, is that appropriate?
Right. And I think that, we have to give ourselves grace around these things, but also modernize and advance, around being more inclusive in our language. I've also seen things. I interviewed one CEO who runs an agency, and she said they had a German client, and her junior team members felt like this German client was so rude. And when she dug into it, she realized that they were just sending direct to the point emails. And she's like, no, they're just being German. And the Americans were really worried that something was wrong. And so remembering that there are cross-communication differences as well that are important to understand. Another one on the generational side is, sort of the fight between digital natives and who I call digital adapters, who maybe have learned technology in the workplace, not before the workplace. And digital natives will send an email to a digital adapter, a boss, and say, answer my email, these questions. And the adapter will say, let's get on the phone. And the native will say, no, just answer my email. And the adapter will say, why don't you just get on the phone? And it goes back to the fact that there's even medium preferences by generation.
Right.
So those are just examples of how there isn't just one language. There are a multiplicity of languages, but it starts by being self-aware and setting what I call laws of digital body language within your team so that you can move from miscommunication to understanding.
That's great. I think that it's so important that you took the time to step back and do research on all the different domains. And that's what I really loved about your book and about your work, is that, especially for those of us that are coaches, and most of the folks that are joining us today are part of the Institute of Coaching, and we're all trying to learn how to coach ourselves to be better at this, but also how to work with our clients more effectively. So as we wrap up, I'd love for you to share, what is your hope for this book? What is your ultimate aim in bringing this to the world at this time?
I'll start with the importance of coaches and the aim with this book. Coaches, you change the world. You impact and make a difference in people's lives. I have had coaches throughout my life, and they have helped me see the potential in me. And so I think one goal would be to really spark ways for coaches to be able to bring these ideas to clients, to their communities, to their families. And most importantly, I think bringing back like the soul of how we connect with one another. But in a digital world, because I truly believe we can be more geographically inclusive, we can be less visually biased, we can break traditional body language biases if we use digital body language well. And that's really my aspiration for this book, that we can have crucial conversations in a digital age, but we need a different framework for it, because a lot of sort of models of the past will not fit this new world with a different type of body of language. The other thing I created was a special digital body language master course for coaches. And it's on my website, Jeff. It's at dblcourse.com. So if there are any trainers or coaches or managers who want to become experts at this skill to bring it to their clients, I'm really excited to create that for them because I believe that it's the ripple effect of all of us that will create change.
That's so true. It's such an interesting paradox, because I think on the one hand, there is a cultural meme, in the wake of the pandemic and the disruption, that we're all getting disconnected because of the digital communication that we're trying to do in the Zoom world that we're all in. And I think what you're pointing to and what your research gives us is access to deeper connection, actually, and greater intimacy. It's ironic and a paradox that you could actually be more connected, but it starts with having the tools, right, that you have created in the research, and becoming more aware of what we're actually doing with our bodies, with our words, and with our with the digital tools that we're using. So I think it's really fantastic that this book came out right now. I think it's perfectly timed. I'm really honored that you came and joined us. I have mine on my Kindle, so I'm not holding it up, but I have loved reading it. And I'm going to welcome Erica back, everyone. In a month or two, we're going to have about a 90-minute webinar with her with the Institute of Coaching. So stay tuned for that. This recording will be available on our website, instituteofcoaching.org. So if you didn't get a chance to see this, or if you want to go back and revisit and get a little more information about Erica and the book and about the Institute, please check us out at theinstituteofcoaching.org. And I just want to take a deep breath. I was trying to pay attention to my digital body language throughout. And I just really appreciate your taking the time. I know you're running around the world virtually right now, sharing this incredible message with everyone, but I am really thrilled to have the opportunity to talk to you. So thank you for joining us, Erica. And I just wish you all the best with the book. And I look forward to having you back for a 90-minute conversation, and we can get to all the different questions that people have.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Thank you, everyone.
So thank you, everyone, for joining us, and join us again in a couple of weeks. And check out on our website, you can find out who's next on CoachX Live. Take care, everyone.